beside us. This is Stacy on the Right on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
It's my pleasure to welcome Mark Mix, President of the National Right to Work Committee and President of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Mark, thanks for your time tonight.
Stacy, good to be on with you, and these are indeed crazy times, but they're freeing times. If our former president is a role model, then they are freeing times indeed.
Yes, don't you feel cut loose? I do.
Well, that and the guys up at Sturgis, the guys and gals at Sturgis riding around on Harleys make you feel a little more better about freedom too. But yeah.
They're doing it, but they really never stopped getting together. I think the Sturgis guys were together last summer as well. But I also saw Lollapalooza. I don't know, was that 1 million people? A few 100,000? Definitely a large gathering with no masks.
Yeah, indeed. But it was all okay. COVID doesn't spread in those types of events. You should know that by now, Stacy. We've said a whole year and a half of that proving that.
Definitely not being smarter about the COVID, because it's smarter than any other virus we've ever encountered. It definitely knows how to get you when you're standing up at the restaurant, not when you're sitting down. So let's talk about the Senate and this infrastructure bill. First of all, the number of rhinos that we have in our party seems to grow with every week. We had all of these people cross over and quote-unquote bipartisanship, which the Democrats never offer to us. They're never bipartisan with us. And they voted to end debate on the $1 trillion infrastructure bill, and they stood up in front of the sticks and microphones to kind of crow about it.
Yeah, Stacy, these are really confusing times because, first of all, we're talking about trillions of dollars. If you go back just over the last 12 months, I mean, the federal budget deficit's increased by about $6 trillion. And somehow the Republicans that allowed this bill to proceed to the bill, using cloture to end the filibuster that was basically keeping the negotiations alive, they voted to allow to proceed to the bill, and then the bill got shown to us all, and it's $1.2 trillion, and somehow these 18 Republicans that voted to move to the bill and then voted for to move to final passage on the bill are basically saying that it's paid for somehow, and the numbers, the math of Washington gets more confusing by the minute, Stacy. They say that money that was printed before that wasn't used for COVID is going to be repurposed, but somehow that frees up other money. It was debt to begin with. It's really confusing, but yes, there's going to be a vote about 4 o'clock in the morning, appears to this morning, I guess tomorrow morning, to pass this infrastructure bill. And basically, it's a blueprint for the larger agenda that will come up in the budget reconciliation bill. That's another $3.5 trillion. And, union officials are very interested in this too, Stacy, to get back to the point kind of where union officials are using the infrastructure bill and their special privileges to have union labor do the work and have union wages paid to those that do the work and make jobs and construction projects cost 30% more. That is, if they're actually doing construction. There's a lot in this bill that has nothing to do with infrastructure as you and I would describe it.
So can we when we say that it is a monumental mistake for Republicans to join together with Democrats on this bill, the things that stick out to me, and I know there are so many more, you just named off one really important one, which is an expansion of unionization, but we're also talking about taxing Americans for every mile they drive. We're talking about amnestying millions of people who are here illegally, probably to include the 1 million who've just crossed in the first 6 months of the Biden administration. And there's just so much more than that. Like this is a monstrosity of a negative bill. The Republicans never recover from helping to pass this. But on the other hand, don't we see that the Democrats would never cross over? Like when Trump was president, they would not cross over to give him even an inch. When he said, I'll amnesty all of your DACA recipients, I just want the end of chain migration, or I just want wall funding that's clean and clear, they wouldn't even do that for him. And that could have been a bipartisan win for them. They won't do it. So I just don't understand the Republicans doing this. It's like they're signing their death warrant.
Well, I wish I could explain their behavior, but you're right. I mean, the infrastructure bill that President Trump proposed was larger than this one, and it actually had infrastructure elements in it to help rebuild bridges and roads and railroads and ports and do things that are important for the economic vitality of the country. This bill has a little bit of that in it. Some people say it's as little as 23% of the $1.2 trillion. Some say it's more. If you talk to or listen to Rob Portman, the retiring Ohio senator, Republican retiring senator, he'll tell you that $550 billion is infrastructure. The rest of it, the other $700 billion, has something to do with social engineering and climate corps and climate corps. Excuse me, that was an Obama slip there. But it was, it's amazing, Stacy, how they can justify this. And if you look at the folks, I mean, there's a couple surprises here, but it's the regular cast of characters: Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and Roy Blunt. I mean, these folks, they are
Roy Blunt.
I don't know. Yeah, that's not surprising to me. He's retiring too. Yeah, from Missouri. You're familiar with that guy.
Yes. That man has bought my kids hot cocoa at the Starbucks in Ladue. I mean, this is a guy who he used to sometimes call me and take my temperature on stuff that was going on, and I would think to myself, wow, I would be impressed, but I know this is part of, finding out if I'm going to come out against something beforehand by asking me, what do you think about so-and-so? So, I mean, this is a man that I know. From when he was running for the Senate seat, he was holding court at the Hilton Frontenac, and he invited people over. And back then, I was just a little school board activist, and so he asked me to come in and sit with him for 7 minutes exactly to talk about school choice, and it was like talking to the chair. I don't think anything I said about how important school choice was went into his brain, but it was an opportunity for him to say, to some other group of people, oh yeah, that school choice activist, yeah, she came over and we met, to kind of get a tacit endorsement without me saying anything. So he's a political operator for sure, but this seems even out of character for him. It's as if he's like, okay, I might as well get drunk and, embarrass myself because I'm on the way out. This is worse than shortitis.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you won't go far. If you think you'll return to Missouri, I mean, most of these people, I think 95% of the retirees from Congress, either the House or the Senate, end up staying in Washington because they kind of like it. And, unfortunately, that's a story we've heard way too many times. And, they want to believe that they're doing something to try to get along, but the Democrats play them every time. It is like Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football.
Mm-hmm.
She promises she won't move it this time, and Charlie Brown makes a great effort, and he runs at it, tries to kick it, and falls right on his derriere all the time, every time. Excuse me.
All right. Well, you know what? It's the truth, though, and isn't it time that we kind of discuss the truth? So the infrastructure bill also rewards blue states for driving up immigration levels. Talk about that a little bit. What's the reward?
Yeah, well, I mean, the reward is probably the federal money that will follow these people. And, it's a lot like the COVID bailout. I mean, most of the states that got the biggest COVID bailouts were states that were financially broke. They were mismanaged and massive union monopoly control of the bureaucracies and pension funds that were on critical status. And yet they used the COVID crisis and the bailout for COVID to basically paper over the inefficiencies in those governments. I mean, the red states are doing quite well financially. There's some that are struggling, but for the most part, the states that got the biggest reward were the so-called blue states that are on the, financial precipice. And so what probably is happening here, I don't know the exact language, but I suspect the federal money will follow the immigrants. They will follow the people where they place them and where they go. And that federal money will follow those places that accept them and where they end up. And that's probably the secret to all that when it comes to immigration or illegal aliens being, given amnesty in this whole thing. It's a mess, and it's really frustrating. And I know Americans are getting frustrated too, and that's good. And Stacy, the more you talk about it, the more I think hopefully Americans will wake up and pay attention.
Well, I mean, they'll have no dearth of me talking about it, because if it's one thing I can do is talk about it, inform, and share, and, bring great guests like yourself on. And if you're just tuning in, we're chatting with Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee and president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. We're talking about the infrastructure bill, and so let's just play a game of, is this real and will it actually do anything? Lead pipe replacement funds? Are we actually going to see lead pipes replaced, or is this as good as us talking about it?
Well, it's probably as good as we're talking about it. It's one thing. It's funny you mentioned that, because there was a labor commissioner out in Oklahoma that was elected back in the 1990s. Her name was Brenda Renfro, and she got elected. And one of the first things she did was investigate the underground projects that union officials had been submitting to increase the prevailing wages, the union wage in their state. And so they went out to all of these underground storage tanks, and guess what they found, Stacy? Nothing.
I don't know.
They didn't find anything. They found these reports and said, yeah, we built this underground, this is the wages we paid to bury this tank, and there was no tank there. I mean, these types of, shell games are being played with us, and the amount of money is just so overwhelming we can't get our arms around it. I mean, there's $10 billion for the Civilian Climate Corps. There's $175 billion to subsidize electronic vehicles. But unfortunately, the incentives for the electronic vehicles, you can only subsidize union-made electric vehicles. Well, Elon Musk and 60% of the American car or the electric cars that are sold in America are Teslas. They're not unionized. And when Jen Psaki was asked about that, why he wasn't at the White House the other day, when they talked about the electric vehicles and the subsidies and the incentive, and part of that's in the infrastructure bill, she goes, "You can guess why they're not unionized." I mean, these stories, it gets really, really frustrating for Americans who, one, they're part of the 94% of American workers that are not unionized. The 27 states that have right-to-work laws that allows workers to have a choice of whether or not they want to financially support a union. They just ignore all that. And Joe Biden and those around him that are whispering in his ear, louder than most people whisper in most presidents' ears, I suspect, are just saying, you know, you just got to keep pushing this social agenda, this environmental agenda, this big labor force unionism agenda, and it's working. It's showing up in all of these bills. And to your point, Stacy, the Republicans somehow are going along with it. It just boggles the mind.
Every time. So what they do is on the campaign trail, they say, you know, I'm not going to be one of those bipartisan Democrats, or I'm not going to work with the Democrats because they don't have anything that they can do that will benefit our country or benefit your kids. And they sound so firm. And then we get this, and I'm not kidding. We're talking about them joining together on a bill where pretty much everything in it is stuff that Republicans ran against. Now, I'm not talking about Lisa Murkowski or, you know, Mitt Romney. These people who they live in these moderate states so they can continue to get reelected because they don't have to be real Republicans. Roy Blunt, he really, I don't know how he skated under the radar other than he was on the president's, the inaugural committee, the first go round, and so people had really good feelings about that because it made it seem like he really loved President Trump when he didn't. But the others, I don't know. And then Mitch McConnell, it seems like every 3 or 4 months he does a big old, you know, screw you to the American people with a vote or a statement that he'll make about President Trump or some other oddity where you're like, weren't you the one who oversaw the most judges appointed and confirmed of any president in the modern era? Didn't you ever see the remaking of the judiciary back to, you know, the Constitution? And then he goes and does crazy stuff like, you know, after January 6th, the comments about President Trump and so on and so forth. It's like a catalog of awfuls with good stuff underneath because he really did help President Trump with the judiciary, and that is something that outlasts him and President Trump and pretty much all the rest of us. But it doesn't make up for the fact that he's now voting for this.
Yeah, you know, it's hard to explain Mitch McConnell. You know, some people say he's the smartest Senate strategist there ever was. Some people curse his name. In instances like this, it almost seems like he's too smart by half. It just doesn't make it much sense. And, you know, when you have guys like Senator Cassidy from Louisiana going on, and John Cornyn from Texas voting for the bill, I mean, there's just a bunch of folks here, Deb Fischer from Nebraska, you know, Tom Tillis from North Carolina. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense what they're doing. I mean, the Democrats, I mean, if Tom Tillis didn't learn a lesson about the Democrats trying to spend about $100 million to defeat him just because he had an R behind his name, not because he was voting the way they liked, but because he had a R behind his name, they don't learn lessons, and maybe they're just trying to placate those that are attacking them, and maybe that's why we have to raise our voice a little bit louder, because they must be convinced there's as much possible political pain coming from our side as there is the other side, and that's really the lesson we have to learn here. These people think about nothing except getting reelected, and those that are retiring, like Blunt and Burr and a few others that are on the bill here, Portman from Ohio, you know, those folks, they're looking for their next, their next job or their next opportunity. But the politicians here, you know, they're looking to basically say, how do I get reelected? And spending money has always been a good way to try to improve your ability to get elected. We've learned that to the tune of about, what, $30 trillion now, Stacy?
Yeah, we really have learned a lot. And the other thing I think we've learned this go around is you can replace garbage leadership with just straight up payments, straight up government payments, because that's what the Biden administration is doing. They're paying parents and, you know, anyone you can think of that could possibly get a payment from the government, they're getting it. You're looking in your account and you're seeing a little payment from the government. You're like, what's this doing here? So, I mean, because it's going out to people who clearly don't qualify income-wise, which means next year they'll count that as income and you'll be taxed on it, or you'll have to return the whole amount with some interest. But they don't care about that. They're really just they're hell-bent on making sure that everyone is getting some kind of payment from the government. I want to give you the last word on this. Is there anything else about the infrastructure bill that you want people to know, or should people bother to call their legislators? I've been telling people to do that, and I do think it has an impact. Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin have been swayed on a few issues so far in this cycle.
Absolutely. There's never not an opportunity to go call your legislators. You have to call them and tell them what you think. This bill is going to be voted on shortly, and then comes the Budget Reconciliation Act, and that's really where the big money and the big kind of social engineering is going to come in. It's obviously here in the so-called infrastructure bill. It's probably a little bit late now, although there was a couple of amendments. There's one amendment, Stacy, on Bitcoin this afternoon that caused some real consternation and may cause some Republicans to vote against it that are on the list that allowed to get to the floor. But once they voted on cloture, see, this is what they'll probably do. Once they voted on cloture, that was the vote to pass the bill, because now it's simply a 51 vote margin to pass this infrastructure bill. The filibuster no longer applies. They've given that up, and that's why the right to filibuster ends at 4 a.m. this morning. The 30 hours of post-cloture debate that is occurring right now will end, and they'll vote on it. So Republicans, a lot of those Republicans on that list may vote against the bill and say, well, I voted to proceed to it, but they wouldn't make my corrections. But the bill will pass with 51 votes or more. I suspect some of these Republicans will vote for it. But this is the kind of games they play, and then they come back and say, well, I voted against it on final passage. Well, thank you very little, because your vote on cloture, your vote to proceed with the bill on the technical grounds and how to get to the bill, how to get it to the floor of the Senate, is really the vote that made it work. And that's really where the metal, where the rubber meets the road, no pun intended on the infrastructure bill. But yes, absolutely call your senators and tell them to oppose this huge deficit-busting, debt-increasing, massive government payoff before we get to the $3.5 trillion reconciliation, which will come up in September when they come back. It's just not going to stop.
My hope is that people somehow get an inkling for what you just shared, and we begin to understand just how dastardly and insidious this whole thing is. But until the cows come home, I will always recommend that people call your senators, let them know. If you're not calling to tell them to vote against it, which you should say that, but you should also, like my phone call to Senator Blunt's office should say something like, you may be short, you may not have much time left, but there's no excuse for you to behave like this, and also we won't forget. So, maybe you should stay in D.C. because you won't be popular here. People will be throwing bananas and eggs at you if we catch you at the grocery store or any place that you might, just show up. No more hot cocoa with the kids for you, Senator Blunt.
Well, Stacy, you served the country once in a different capacity. Now you're serving it again, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. And no doubt there'll be more to make you mad as the weeks and months proceed. But making sure people are aware, is the most important job we have. And I think it was Madison or Jefferson said that an informed electorate is the only way we keep control of this government. And frankly, we've probably lost control of our government, I think, if we think back on the kind of the destruction of all the Bill of Rights amendments. They're getting close to basically overturning them all. But we'll keep fighting, and we have to keep fighting. It's worth it to keep fighting.
It is. It's worth it to keep fighting as long as we're alive, because we then don't have to go to bed at night thinking, well, I'm not doing anything, or I'm just riding along. Because if you're just riding along, you're not only not helping, you're helping them. So Mark is absolutely correct on that. It's always such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us on a Monday night. Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee and also the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, Stacy. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Talk to you again soon, and have a great night.